Welcome everyone back to my little corner of the internet. Today I'm going to be giving you my winter book recommendations. Let's get into it. These are my winter book recommendations. However, if you're here thinking you're going to get the holiday festivities, wintertime celebration reads, you're wrong. I think you can find so many of those recommendations on so many different booktubers channels. So, like my non-spooky October book reads recommendation, these are my recommendations for any time of winter that are not holiday centric. The first book that I want to recommend is The Romanov Bride by Robert Alexander. Why this book? Chances are you probably haven't even heard of this book. Honestly, I had never heard of it. I simply picked it up at a bookstore one day because I found the cover interesting, and as a kid, I was obsessed with the movie Anastasia.
Once upon a
So I ended up picking this up and I actually did really enjoy it. This tells the story of the Grand Duchess Elisaveta. I'm gonna get this.
3 days later.
This is the story of Grand Duchess Elisaveta. I did it. Elisaveta was a German princess who ended up marrying into the Romanov family. And this is a historical fiction novel that reimagines or imagines what her life really was like within the court just before the Bolshevik Revolution. And this is a split perspective between Elisaveta and Pavel, a young Bolshevik who becomes a part of the revolution. And the story flips between their two perspectives as these incredibly divergent paths end up overlapping and intertwining one day. Elisaveta is a very kind and generous and gentle woman, but her husband, the Grand Duke Sergei of the Russian court, is the complete opposite. It says that he rules both his lands and his wife with a cold iron fist. So why this for a winter recommendation? Let me read you not the very first sentence, but in the first page of the novel. And you'll see if you can get an idea for this book. Feeling the chill of the October night settle gently yet firmly through his ragged clothing, Pavel scooted closer to the flames. When he lifted his feet right up to the fire, Pavel felt the blessed warmth and saw it, too, as steam swirled through his muddy felt boots. It had already snowed this week, but glancing upward, he knew it wouldn't tonight. No, it couldn't. They were so close to the polar circle, and the great northern sky was perfect, a vast blanket of deep blue, sprinkled heavily with stars and more stars yet. Indeed, it felt like the very last of all nights, and in a way it was, at least here, because by the first of tomorrow's light he would be making a change of lodging. He sucked in the night air, let the scent of the loamy soil and sweet pine wood fill his body and soul. Bozhe moi, my God, he thought. Vladimir and he had worked so hard, digging and digging for nearly a week, and now this was their reward. A glorious night. How had he made it this far, lived this long, outwitting first the Tsar's secret police, next fighting for the revolution and civil war? I'm a lucky man, Vladimir. Do you have any idea why, eh? No, tell me, Pavel, why are you so lucky? Because I'm 50, and no men in my family have ever seen so many winters. I don't know why I did the Russian accent. It just came out. I don't even know if it was that good. My brother spoke, past tense, present tense, whatever. My brother at one point was pretty fluent in Russian, and I did what I could to pick up the accent. Anyway. Anything set in Russia just gives me winter vibes. Russia is known for such a harsh, cold winter so much of the year that I really think any story set in Russia or works by Russian authors, I always want to read in wintertime. And the beginning of this novel, to me, is a great example of why that is. The book itself is an incredibly interesting perspective of the two complete opposite sides of the revolution. Those who were from the court, who were extremely wealthy, they held the power, and that of the poor who wanted the uprising to embrace socialism and eventually communism, and why they wanted that. And the way that the two lives end up intertwining is really, really well done. Now, this author also wrote The Kitchen Boy and Rasputin's Daughter. I want to say The Kitchen Boy is probably his most famous work. Again, I have never heard anything about this book outside of me picking up at a bookstore and reading it. I've never heard anybody talk about it other than that. But I do think that this is kind of a hidden gem. It's not a 5-star read for me, but I do want to say it was probably between a 3.5 to a 4. And I definitely think it's worth picking up. And I definitely think it's worth picking up in the winter. The next book that I have is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This isn't, again, a solely winter set book. It does span a couple of different seasons, but it does have a time period in the book that does actually have very cold weather. You get the feel of winter and that emptiness, that harshness, though, from the premise of the book. And the premise of the book is that things begin disappearing from the world, and as they disappear from the world, they disappear from everyone's memories collectively, except for a very select few people who never lose the memory of things. So one day people will wake up and they'll just not remember what roses were. And as a result, all of the roses on this island are thrown into the rivers, never to be grown again. They wake up and they find that they've forgotten what hats are. And so every hat on the island is destroyed. And behind these collective forgettings are a secret police organization that enforces the loss of memory. So if they find that people have not forgotten, they're rounded up and taken away. And so it becomes a fight for survival. And the story focuses on two characters. One, a girl who is forgetting, and she's a novelist. And then her editor is the one in the story who has all of his memories. And so she fights to protect him and to keep her memories, or to try to fight against that collective forgetting. And I can't really describe why this to me feels like a winter book, but like I said, the sense of loss, the sense of emptiness, the sense of things ending, for me feels very fitting for winter. When winter is used in metaphors and allegories, it's used as an ending. It's the winter of one's life is in your elderly years, as you're forgetting things, as your body is failing, and it's going to be the end of your life. And so in that way, I think this just, for me, elicits those same kind of feelings that winter can evoke, unpleasant feelings, but part of life. And so I think that The Memory Police would be a great book to read in the winter time. My next book is a double. Get my light on it. It is Jack London's The Call of the Wild and White Fang. Now, if you can see the cover, classic winter book. Both of these stories are set in wintertime and in harsh winter landscapes. And these are basically mirror stories of each other. Most people are familiar with The Call of the Wild. I think people are less familiar with White Fang. So The Call of the Wild is where a domesticated dog finds himself through different circumstances, I believe in Alaska. It's been quite a while since I read this book. It's been a while. And he is taken in by a human who sees his plight, and they become companions. And they are set against the rugged wilderness of the untamed wild. And White Fang is interestingly enough the opposite. It is a wild animal. It's a half dog, half wolf pup. And it starts really with his birth and his growing up. And he starts in the wild, and through different circumstances, he ends up befriending and becoming domesticated to a degree. And so these two paths start out completely differently. They kind of come to a central point, and then they again split and diverge into complete opposite directions. The Call of the Wild is a classic novel, but to me, White Fang is just as good a novel, maybe even better. I grew up absolutely loving The Call of the Wild. I loved the dogs. I loved the wild, untamed landscape. I thought Jack London's writing was incredibly easy to read, incredibly easy to understand. It sucks you into the adventure and into the storytelling. And then years later, I read White Fang when I got this double copy, actually. And most of the time, if you go to bookstores, most of the copies of The Call of the Wild that I see are actually doubles, and they're paired with White Fang, interestingly enough. So a lot of times you can pick up 2 for 1 here. When I finally read White Fang, it was everything that I didn't get from Call of the Wild that I didn't even know I was missing. And I really don't know how to describe it other than that. It holds a very, very special place in my heart. Both of these are some of my favorite books of all time, and they are so winter-centric that it is the perfect pair of books to curl up with in a blanket with a hot cup of tea in front of a roaring fire with the snow falling outside. So I cannot recommend enough that you check out Jack London's The Call of the Wild and White Fang. 4 down, 1 to go. And my last winter book recommendation, The Great Gatsby, with this iconic cover. Now, Cameron, you might say, are you insane? The Great Gatsby is not a winter story. It is literally a summer story. The entire thing takes place in a very short span of time in the middle of summer. And to you, I say, yes, I am insane, and you are correct. This book does take place in summer. But sometimes you don't want to read a winter book. You don't want to feel your bones chilled while you're reading, snug and warm in your bed. Sometimes you need something to warm you up. And I can't think of a better book than The Great Gatsby. Was F. Scott Fitzgerald a terrible person? A lot. Yes, very much so. Did he probably steal a significant portion of his wife's work and pass it off as his own? Also, very likely yes. But does that make the novel any less good? No. No, it does not. The Great Gatsby, if you have not read it, is very short. It's a very quick read, and it is one of the most famous of American novels in history. It tells the story of Jay Gatsby, who is pining after somebody that he loved in his youth, and he has wanted to get back with ever since. And so when he comes into money through some ill-gotten means, he decides he is going to try to win her over away from her husband by throwing these lavish parties and luring her back because all she seems to really care about is money. This book really takes a very harsh light to the American dream. It pulls back the veil and reveals the ugliness that lies beneath it. It talks about class in America. It talks about wealth in America. It talks about wealth versus rich in America. If you don't know the difference, Jay Gatsby is new money. He is rich. And Daisy Buchanan and her husband are old money. They are wealthy. And no matter how much the bank accounts match, there is such a distinct and severe class divide. This book is such a good commentary on how fleeting and false and really non-existent the American dream is. And it's basically framed through the lens of Jay Gatsby trying to chase the American dream by chasing Daisy Buchanan. This has some gorgeous writing. This is a very quick read. It has interesting characters, not necessarily likable characters, but interesting characters. And you love the overall experience of reading this, even if you come off going, everybody in this book is awful, except maybe the narrator. But if you want something to warm you up on a cold winter night and keep the chill away, I do highly recommend that you add The Great Gatsby to your winter reading list. And that's it. These are my 5 book recommendations for what to read this winter if you're looking for something other than your standard holiday fare. I'll see you next week, and in the meantime, be kind and keep reading. Bye, everyone.